And my friend and I, we were so nosy. She said, I hear all this noise. Let's get dressed, and if we walk really quiet, my mother is not going to hear us. Her dad got killed in the war too. She won't hear us, and we'll go out and check that out. How come there's so much noise? Well, we sneaked around, and it was the German soldiers trying to get away from the army, and then the army was right behind them. And so they had those big, huge tanks. I said, I think we better go back. Oh no, she said, see, they're throwing candy. And she learned English really fast because the occupation came in a small town like that, and they picked the 3 nicest houses, and the people had to leave now. And they lived there for a week, 10 days, maybe 2 weeks. And so I had to do a lot of interpreting because I'm the only one that had any English knowledge. And then, of course, when you talk it, you pick up in, phrases. And
were you scared when the Americans were coming?
First I was, but then I said, they look just like us. They don't look any different. And the people I stayed with said, what did you expect them to look like? And his wife, the guy that took concern with him, she was saving eggs because she wanted to trade with somebody for those eggs. And one of the giants came in and said, that's all he could say was "Eier." And she said, yeah, so she was going to get him some. He pushed her aside. It was one of those drawers in the kitchen cupboard, and he emptied the drawer, and she was really mad.
So there were bad Americans and good Americans.
Well, they wanted fresh eggs. I mean, you have to think about the propaganda. We were the bad Hitlers, Surprised they didn't shoot us. It was really something. And when I met Opa, that was in Frankfurt was occupied already. He had been in Frankfurt for 3 weeks. That was in '86. And things got better, but not good yet, It was before the currency reform. Yeah. Once they got, then we did. And the American zone was rebuilt before everybody else because they had the Marshall Plan. And they loaned all these builders and stores all that money, and they, Germans are pretty frugal. I mean, you give them some money and they'll make something out of it, And so it was really good. So we were the envy of the other 3. In 48, that wasn't 48, we had the Marshall Plan. And the French zone was awful, absolutely awful.
So what was it like when the war ended? Like, how did the war end for you?
You didn't, that's when I told you, we were watching those guys coming to that small town.
No, and that was how it ended?
And that was it. Then the occupation was there, the war must have been over. There was no fanfare or nothing,
So it really was just kind of like one day the Germans were in charge, one day the Americans were in charge.
And there was a lot of women that were alone. The husbands were in the army, and they were in the POW camp. They didn't come home for a while. And like one of I always thought he was a real uncle, but he wasn't. He was a really good friend of my uncle's, Uncle Carl. And he was in Eugene as a POW. He was an officer. And he got to even go to the University of Oregon and study.
Oh.
He said, when they sent me back and it wasn't half as good in Germany, I was ready to go back.
So you said that, like, well, tell the story about when your father and his poker friends, like, found the wine, and tell that story.
Yeah, they played cards at a different house I can't remember, every month or every weekend. That doesn't make any difference anyway. Anyway, they went to this one guy's house, and he was with photos. I mean, he could take an old photo and make it sing. I mean, really, he was really good. Well, anyway, he said, they played cards and they said, "Oh, I have a surprise for you. If we go to there and there and do whatever, we have to be really careful. We can't take a whole lot of light, but there's cellars down there, and people used to store wine in there." So, of course, oh yeah, you know. So the four marched right over there and took some wine and got inebriated. And then they found this poster, you know. Oh, it was a big one. And it was one of those, I remember it like it was yesterday. There was two great big houses, 4-story houses, and they were like you collapsed them, you know. And that's where they put that poster, and it always said on the poster that the Führer had a baby on one side and Heil Hitler and smiles all over that. And then it would say on the bottom, "For this we thank our Führer," like the Volkswagen, the house, the children, you know. I mean, he was really into education. I mean, he would have educated us for free, you know, because it was for kids. And so, I don't know, I never know, and my mother couldn't figure it out, how they found out that it was my dad and his buddies. Mm-hmm. And that's when the American MP came to the house.
Oh, it was an American MP. I thought it was a Nazi. It was an American MP?
No, we were occupied already.
Okay.
And so, those white helmets and the white... so he came, and my dad explained it to him. And so they had to do something. I can't remember now. And one of the guys that was a social democrat went to school with my Uncle Carl. And all of a sudden the social democrats were important people. See, Hitler really pushed them down, you know. And so they had like a hearing, and this guy was at the hearing, and when he heard the name, he said, "Which one is it? What's his first name?" And so they told him, "Oh, I know his brother really well. Those are harmless people. Just let them go. They had a little fun." And he kept talking, and they let him go. Mm-hmm. They had to pay a fine of some kind. Mm-hmm. But I mean, they could have put him in prison for this thing. Yeah.
Okay, well, we've been talking for about an hour, so I think we'll call it good for tonight. Yeah, but thank you.
Well, I'm glad you are interested, because, you know, it's really history when you think about it. It was... Yeah, my mother finally went to that little town where the two other kids were. And, but I didn't really want to come home. I had it made. I had enough to eat, and I had friends, and we, you know, I mean, I had a lot easier than I would have had at home. Mm-hmm. And so my dad said, "Do you want me to send the police for you to come back home?" I said, "No, I'm coming home." And I went home. So.
Well, thank you.
Okay. It's a